I'm standing here today representing my community. My great-grandmother was one of the founding members of the Santa Rosa Carib community, and my great-aunt served as the Carib Queen until her death, Valentina Medina, and I'm standing here with them today. So on this topic, Indigenous people have already been advantaged by these new instruments, green bonds and carbon credits. Indigenous groups in Brazil sought remediation after their image and their story was used to market a fund. The fund raised money, but the indigenous people were never part of the deal. In Colombia, an indigenous reservation sold carbon credits without the knowledge of its inhabitants. Because of how developed these islands are, with our oil and gas fortunes, we are sometimes seen as a micro of the macro, a smaller or more condensed version of the world at large. We have an opportunity to be an example for others to follow, building on our ancestral intelligence, another kind of AI, moving towards a more sustainable way of living. These islands have enjoyed unbroken occupation by indigenous people. We were not defeated. We assimilated. Although we have suffered many losses, there are many of us who stay true to our way of life as part of our life practice without fanfare or ceremony. The indigenous community was fractured and traumatized by colonialism and has splintered into various organizational representations, some of whom seem more obsessed with the size of their headdress than with bettering the lives of all our relations. There are at least 5 individual indigenous organizations seeking recognition. One of these chiefs wants to develop a model village, and another one wants to ride his horse to town, and another one wants to take his people to Grand Riviere to live in a cave. Of course, there has also been ongoing migrations of indigenous people from the South American mainland, with some people actually renewing old family ties. So the indigenous community is a lot bigger than any of these organizations. It must be difficult for government, funding agencies, and other organizations to relate and to navigate this complex landscape. To make sure there is follow-through on their good intentions, to make sure their interventions meet the people best served. There must be good record-keeping, good governance, transparency, accountability, succession plans, goals, and ideals. Real indigenous people care about the land. We are talking about the forest. We want to talk about water conservation. We want to talk about the protection of our national heritage and our natural heritage. We want to talk about sustainable ways of living. In the Northern Range, you will find families that have lived in the hills for 4 generations and more, at the end of the road, at the gateway to the forest, in Matlot, Blanchisseuse, Brasso Seco, Paria, Cora, Lopino, and Akono. There is a wealth of traditional knowledge about the forest in these places. You learn about the land by listening to it. Sometimes I think we were living in the future already. My family has lived on the banks of the Arima River for decades. We understand that there is medicine growing out of the earth. We were raised to have reverence for the river. In fact, I can distinctly remember the first time I saw garbage in the river. It was sometime in the 80s. Then galvanize, car seats, appliances, and plastic Christmas trees. We used to run barefoot along the riverbank, and now we had to watch for glass bottles then other types of poisons, fertilizer runoff from farms, and waste pipes from new developments leading directly into the river. A lot less freshwater fish there now. We have to go deeper into the forest to make those connections. Some history books said indigenous people were lazy, but we knew there was food, medicine, and fresh water everywhere. And we could sling up our hammocks anywhere. Hammocks were the only real estate we needed. We are still the largest predator on the island. We forget, it seems, that we are all connected. We should be working together on nature-based solutions for our problems. Caribbean indigenous people built houses with natural materials, which also return to the land. This regenerative ideology applies to inanimate objects too. So when I was growing up, there was more of a focus on learning to repair or repurpose broken items, recycle or reuse before getting to repurchase. So I have this idea that we need to go back to the future. Seems like there was more consciousness about using materials which were not harmful to the environment. People who have survived an apocalypse are seeking always to learn how to live in harmony with nature, with the systems that support life. I have lived in the city of Port of Spain off and on over the last 30 years. I've lived in Freeport, and of course, Arima is my hometown. I have observed a growing disconnection from the environment and green spaces. I wonder if this is what has led to a diminished sense of responsibility for the environment. We need to improve our communications with each other, and that includes all our relations, the plants, the rocks, the river, the waterfall. Projects can't happen without people, and we all live together at the top of this mountain. I would really like to see the work of people like Ivan Lachlan and Carl Fitzjames from Brasso Seco highlighted. These two men from completely different walks of life who also share the dream of having areas of the Northern Range protected, and really to see us embrace the idea of understanding that the Northern Range could be an incredible national park, working with the communities that know it best. As Senator Vera mentioned, Tobago's Main Ridge Forest Reserve is one of the oldest protected areas in the world. Last year, he asked that parts of the Northern Range be considered sacred spaces, and in the indigenous community, we could not be happier with that language. My family has navigated that forest for 4 generations, and we treat it with that kind of reverence. I remember going to Avocat Waterfall a couple of years ago and discovering that a previous visitor had stuck a beer can between the rocks at my feet. So imagine that you've taken this hike, and you get to this beautiful waterfall, and you're taking it in, and you're like, oh yes, I need to sit under that waterfall. And you go and you sit there, and you're basking in the beauty of this waterfall, and your offering to that waterfall is to stick a beer can in the rocks. I really have to wonder about the thought processes of people who leave garbage in those spaces. What a terrible offering to make. The success of the designation of a protected space really depends on community support. Trinidad and Tobago is beautiful. Oh, we should be proud of that. We should celebrate that. Young people in the communities bordering the Northern Range should be allowed to work in their communities. You shouldn't have to leave Brasso Seco to go to Sandy Grande to fry chicken in order to make a living if you know the forest and you've known the trails your whole life. They should be able to earn from the knowledge that they possess, knowledge which is valuable Some of these kids can school scientists with their observations of natural life. Some get familiar with the forest at an early age, like me at age 4. They can navigate the trails day or night. I hope we look into revitalizing the trail network and putting people to work alongside the environment. If you visit the island of Dominica and the Waitukubuli Trail, you can get an understanding of how a project like this can change lives and ultimately make our natural environment safer. Some people will be happily engaged with maintaining trails, leading, walking, and camping tours safely and sustainably. So the designation of protection is not just an X on the map. It works best in tandem with community. The IAMovement's Advancing Climate Democracy in Guyana, Suriname, and Trinidad and Tobago program sought to improve education about climate change and its impact. I've also observed and reported on their Vetiver Education and Empowerment Program, VEEP, which has been changing lives in some of the indigenous communities I just mentioned. I just want to say, to see the vetiver grass above ground, it looks like just grass. It's fairly innocuous, simple, and easily overlooked. But underground, its roots would have interlocked with those of its neighbors, strengthening each other and creating a nearly impenetrable wall to stabilize the land and keep things in place. The grass is teaching us. The grass is teaching us. Should I say it again? The grass is teaching us. Giving us a glimpse of what is possible if we work together. Projects like VEEP and revitalizing the trail network, not just in the northern range, but in the southern range as well, would make our forests safer, improve the lives of border communities, giving people at the end of the road a new beginning, a greater sense of self, a greater sense of community, and improving our connection with nature. We are part of nature, not apart from it. Thank you.